So good morning, everyone. Welcome to MKTG 612 Brand Management. This is our second lecture. And in today's session, we will be looking at customer-based brand equity and brand positioning. Now, we will not be delving deep into the model itself. We will do that in our next session. However, in today's session, we are going to try to understand the basis of the customer-based brand equity model and its origins and how it influences firm decisions regarding brand positioning. So as usual, there are certain learning outcomes we hope to achieve by the end of the session. And today there are 3 of them. The first one is to be able to define what customer-based brand equity is. And then to also be able to outline the sources and outcomes of customer-based brand equity. And then ultimately, we will also be able to identify the 4 components of brand positioning and understand how to develop a good brand positioning. So these are the main learning outcomes that we hope to achieve by the time this session is over. So let's get into it with a brief introduction of customer-based brand equity, hence referred to as CBBE. So CBBE approaches the issue of brand equity from the perspective of the customer. So this presupposes that customer-based brand equity is brand equity as considered from the customer's perspective and what it means to the customer, which means that there are other perspectives from which we can view brand equity. However, for our purposes, we are going to look at it from the perspective of the customer, hence the use of the CBBE model. Now, the basic premise here is that the power of a brand lies in what customers have learned, felt, seen, and heard as a result of their experiences of a brand over time. So that is how the CBBE model emerged. It emerged, like we said, from the customer's perspective, based on what the customer has learned, felt, seen, and heard as a result of their experiences over time. And based on what you know in marketing, these experiences are formed in myriad ways. So once the customer is able to form these experiences, as time goes on, the experiences become more refined and more complex, hence resulting in what we refer to as customer-based brand equity. So basically what we are saying that the power of what we refer to as a brand and the amount of influence it has on customers in terms of their intentions and actions lies in what resides in the minds and hearts of these customers based on their experiences over time. Because you will bear with me that people do not just get up and become accustomed to a brand. They do not just get up and become familiar with a brand or develop some kind of affinity towards a brand. Usually when you hear customers talk about brands, they talk about it from a perspective of a relationship or some kind of deep connection or affiliation, right? And this is as a result of these experiences they have built over time, which we refer to. So that is where the power of brands lie, strategically in the minds and hearts of customers. And that is how the customer-based brand equity model gets its origins, right? So with that being said, what is customer-based brand equity? It is simply the differential effect that consumer brand knowledge, because remember we talked about the fact that its origins are in customer experiences as a result of what they have heard, felt, and seen over the years or over time when it comes to specific brands. So the model we can see in front of us refers to this differential effect that consumer brand knowledge has on their response to the marketing of a particular brand over time. And this brand power is built over time in the mind and the heart of the consumer in the form of this pyramid we are talking about, starting from the broad base where the brand is able to establish their identity with the customer. So initially, when the brand introduces themselves to the customer for the first time, it's all about getting to know each other. So the brand wants to know who their customer is, and their customer wants to know who the brand is. And that is essentially what the firm will seek to communicate initially through their marketing programs. And as time goes on, when they have established their identity, they move on to create meaning for their brand in the mind of the consumer. Because it's not just enough to have an identity, you also need to have some degree of meaning to the customer, which will ultimately lead to them eliciting certain responses from the customer once they put out their marketing programs. Because at this point, the customer has identified the brand, has some kind of meaning that they attach to this brand, and therefore will bring that understanding to their consumption situations, which will ultimately influence their responses to marketing programs, right? And then over time, as the firm continues to build upon these experiences that customers have had by way of developing their identity and establishing meaning and eliciting responses, they ultimately build strong relationships with the customer, such that it's no longer about the basics of identifying with the customer and getting them to attach some degree of meaning to their brand, which they will bring to certain consumption situations and ultimately give out responses in that regard. But it will become more about a relationship where the firm is now dealing with the customer, not just as a figure, but as a lifelong partner whom they are going to continue to benefit from in the long term. So customer-based brand equity is a process, as you can see. It is not a one-time event. And the fact that customer-based brand equity is built over time means that firms have to invest significant amounts of resources into this process. So a brand cannot be built overnight, and a brand cannot be built without a significant investment of resources. So essentially, for firms to be able to create this differential effect, they have to invest not just time, but a significant amount of resources to ensure that this process becomes a success, not at one time, but consistently as time goes on. Please, I hope we all understand.
Yes, Doc.
Good.
Yes, Doc.
So now that we have been able to define customer-based brand equity, let's look at the dimensions of the definition as we have mentioned it. Now, the first thing that stood out when we gave that definition was the differential effect that is created. And this differential effect is basically referring to the fact that brand equity arises as a result of the different responses that consumers have to brand communication or to marketing programs. Now, you will bear with me that regardless of who the communication is going to, marketers would always take painstaking effort to plan individual elements in their marketing communication to communicate or elicit a certain kind of response. And that is because they want to be able to ensure that this differential effect is accounted for. So you will not find a marketer putting together some kind of marketing communication or developing a marketing program without being cognizant of these differences in consumer responses. So you realize that one particular advert, for instance, that makes so much sense to somebody would ultimately not make that much sense to another individual. Have you experienced that before?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, Doc.
Someone likes a particular advert so much, someone hates it so much. Someone watches an advert and picks a certain kind of communication or message from it, and another person watches it and their mind goes in a totally different direction. These are semblances of the differential effects that we are talking about. And without this differential effect, marketers will not be able to elicit and maintain brand equity as we know it. Again, in the definition, we also identify that another thing that stood out was brand knowledge, because this differential effect came about as a result of the differences in brand knowledge. And these differences are in response to the firm's communication as a result of what the customer has learned felt, seen, and heard about the brand. So you would realize that a firm may decide in their marketing programs to use a particular influencer or brand ambassador to push their products and services. Now, depending on what the consumer base that is being targeted with this communication has experienced in terms of what they have learned, felt, seen, and heard, some of them may love this brand communication and attach a significant amount of meaning to it based on who the ambassador is. Others may also dislike it so much because of what they know about this particular ambassador. A typical example is the brands in Ghana now who currently use a lot of entertainers and industry experts as ambassadors. They refer to them as the celebrities, right? And you will notice that recently, a lot of the brands are using popular artists like Stonebwoy and Shatta Wale and Kwame Eugene, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes,
I tell.
Good. Now, I know people who don't have a problem with the brands that they are representing, but they have problems with the brand ambassadors. So, based on their experiences, someone may not have a problem with the particular brand ambassador they have chosen, and therefore will have a different kind of response to the brand as a result. However, based on another person's experiences regarding this particular brand ambassador, which may not necessarily be positive, they may have a different set of responses to the brand's communication. Am I making sense?
Yes,
Yes, Doc.
Yes.
So there are people who dislike certain brands, not because the brand is bad or doesn't do well in its category, but mainly because the brand is associated with certain experiences that this particular consumer has learned, felt, seen, and heard over time, which are not necessarily positive. So brand knowledge in that regard is a key dimension of customer-based brand equity, which we cannot afford to ignore. Again, we need to talk about consumer responses. And I think I talked briefly about it a moment ago when I was talking about brand knowledge and how consumer experiences can influence their knowledge and in response to firms' marketing communication. Because like I said, based on the knowledge that the consumer has about a brand over time, it influences how they respond to marketing communication that the brands put out. So that means that whatever communication that the firm puts out regarding their brand will be judged by the consumer based on their preferences and perceptions about the brand as a result of what they have experienced in the form of brand knowledge, right? And this will lead to various behaviors in the form of deciding which brand to choose, for instance. And this is a direct reflection of the differential effects that the brand's communication has made, as well as the knowledge that the consumer has about the brand, which they have learned over time. This also influences the recall of copy points, as well as the recall of the brand in its entirety. So you realize that there are certain aspects of a brand that will resonate with the consumer forever. Like in our last session, I was talking about Malaysia, Truly Asia, and you hadn't heard about it before. Perhaps because it transcends your time and it is kind of an old marketing concept, but it resonated so well and created so many lasting experiences that the people of that era had a unique experience with the brand, and therefore it held then and still holds a special place in our minds as consumers when it comes to tourism marketing. Because Malaysia Truly Asia was one of the globally successful tourism marketing campaigns that ever existed before tourism marketing even became popular and destination branding became a thing, right? So that is a typical example of the recall of copy points, because today I can still remember the main copy points from their campaign, and that was simply Malaysia Truly Asia. the point I even remember the song, right? The sound bites that goes with the ad. And that is a typical example of recall of copy points from an ad. Another typical example of these responses could be in the form of responses to a sales promotion, which never fails in our context in Ghana here. Ghanaian consumers are always excited when they hear about any kind of promotion going on, because it means they get to make a good deal. And Ghanaians love deals. True or false?
True.
Yeah, Ghanaians love a good deal. So, in essence, the definition of customer-based brand equity presents us with these three key points: that to be able to earn customer-based brand equity, firms have to create a differential effect, which will be largely as a result of the brand knowledge that consumers possess, which they have built over time as a result of their experiences. And these will ultimately lead to how they respond to firms' marketing communications, which could be anywhere from influencing how they choose a brand, to how they recall copy points from a brand ad, or to how they respond to the sales promotions that are periodically put out by the brand, right? So that is it for the dimensions of the CBBE definition that we need to be cognizant of. Now that we know this, what does it mean for us as marketers? With this understanding of what customer-based brand equity entails, there are two main questions that will arise for a marketer in this circumstance. The first one is, what do different brands mean to different consumers? Because now we know that a differential effect has to be created, and this will be based on brand knowledge. So we need to be able to understand what these different brand knowledge structures are and how they are built. And the beginning where we can start to get this understanding we are looking for is by first trying to answer the question of what different brands mean to different consumers. And then ultimately go on to answer the question, how does the brand knowledge of consumers affect their responses to marketing activity? Because we've been told that the brand knowledge ultimately influences how they respond. So we need to understand how these responses come about so that as marketers, we can do what we do best by influencing the process and making sure that whatever response that they give is in the favor or in the best interest of the brands that we represent, right? So basically, when it comes to customer-based brand equity, this is what marketers seek to know. And this is the way that as marketers, we can be able to go ahead and build strong customer-based brand equity by seeking answers to these questions with the understanding of the dimensions of the customer-based brand equity definition that we just went through. So that is that for the introduction regarding customer-based brand equity. We'll delve deeper into the model itself in our next session. So let's move on and talk about brand equity as a bridge. Now, why are we saying brand equity is a bridge? We are saying this primarily because, first of all, we have understood that brand knowledge plays a key role in consumer responses when it comes to building customer-based brand equity, right? So we can clearly see that customer knowledge drives the differences that manifest themselves in terms of brand equity. Now, given that customer knowledge drives this process of building brand equity, we as marketers need to understand that we need to create the right means and circumstances for this customer knowledge to be built and grown and cultivated over time, right? So in that regard, as we are doing these marketing programs and implementing these marketing activities, we are dictating in a way over time how consumers should think and feel about our brand. And depending on how well we perform this process, we will either be dictating an appropriate or inappropriate future direction for our brand. That is why as marketers, we have to choose every element of our marketing program carefully, because every decision that we make affects the strength of this bridge from where we started from in terms of creating the brand, connecting to where we are heading in the future, being what we are building by means of brand equity, meaning what we are creating in the minds of the consumers, which we hope for them to identify our brand with over time. So everything from how you design the products, to how you package it, to the materials that you use, to how you price it, to how you promote it in terms of the kind of sales promotions you do, the kind of advertising you do, the kind of influencers that you bring on board. All of these things are decisions that could dictate either an appropriate or inappropriate future direction for your brand. So you realize that we have ample evidence of brands that have chosen to represent themselves in a certain manner that has affected all the efforts they have put in from the introduction of the brand into the market up until that period, which has jeopardized all their marketing efforts in building brand equity. We see typical examples of these happening, especially where firms choose to associate themselves with particular brand ambassadors or influencers, or to associate themselves with certain institutions. So a typical example is what happened in the US recently, where Tiger Woods got himself into a difficult situation, and it ultimately affected all the brands that he represented. Do we remember that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what exactly was it about, if you remember?
I do remember that it was. I've raised my hand. Sorry, Doc. I do remember it was a bit of a sex scandal.
Good.
And it was all over.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people canceled him. But then again, it was around the time where cancel culture was actually very early.
Mm-hmm.
But then since he was like one of the first people to be the first victim of, let's say, cancel culture, it really hit him hard.
Yeah.
Which is why when he bounced back a few years ago during golfing, it was such a huge moment in golfing history, because people were like, he had been cancelled for so many years. It's more like he had been in exile.
Yeah.
So coming back was like a very big thing for him.
Yeah. But that ultimately did not make a lot of the brands that dropped him as the ambassador to take him back.
Yes, it didn't.
Good. That was because those brands had their brand equity take a major hit as a result of what happened, right? So that is a typical example of how marketing choices and decisions can either enhance or detract from the brand equity of a particular firm or institution. So these choices have to be made very carefully, right? Individuals argue that in Ghana here, consumers are fickle-minded because they do not necessarily associate the actions of brands with the influencers or ambassadors that they are associated with, right? So you realize that a lot of the brands that controversial celebrities like Shatta Wale represent do not necessarily take a hit when he does something outrageous. Would you agree to that assertion?
Yes.
Because they claim that the Ghanaian consumer is not that deep, is not that fickle-minded, right? So they will not necessarily react the way a consumer in the United States, for instance, would. That is debatable, by the way. Because someone would argue that, okay, that can be said for Shatta Wale fans or individuals who have some kind of unique association with the Shatta Wale brand. And again, that is a valid argument. Wouldn't you agree?
Please.
Yeah. So you realize that the whole concept of brand equity, as we are referring to it, is a very complicated and complex process that marketers cannot afford to take for granted. Because like we mentioned, it takes a lot of time and resources to build. However, from what we have just discussed, it takes a split second for what has taken several years to build to just crash and burn, isn't it?
Yes, please.
Good. Nike recently had a close shave with the devil worshipper sneakers. Do you remember that? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, though.
And they had to go on a total damage control drive, including lawsuits, public statements, PR statements, everything, to dissociate themselves from that particular action and to let their target audience know that they are not down with such actions and therefore their brand should not be penalized for what was done. These are all semblances of how various actions and decisions, both on the part of the marketer and sometimes without the marketer's intervention, can either enhance or detract from brand equity. Right? So in that case, brand equity indeed is a bridge, because you realize that even in certain circumstances where certain situations have led to attempts to cancel certain brands, you will realize that the kind of effort they have put into building their brand over the years sometimes acts as a bridge that cushions them in these difficult times. Would you agree?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, madam.
Yeah. Right. So in all the ways we have talked about right now, we have been able to clearly understand and justify the role of brand equity as a bridge and how it helps firms to be able to build and dictate the future direction of their brand towards making it stronger and making it more able to last and outlast competition. All right, so that is for brand equity as a bridge. So up until this time, we have been talking a lot about brand knowledge as the basis for customer-based brand equity and as the basis for how firms are able to utilize brand equity as a bridge to be able to build the future direction of their brand. So it's high time we understood what brand knowledge was about. So essentially, when we say brand knowledge, we are basically talking about the fact that brand knowledge creates the differential effect that drives brand equity. And what is it? It is the knowledge that we have about various brands and products and services from specific firms or institutions that are as a result of a consumer's experiences over time. And these reside in the mind and the heart of the consumer, such that once it has been built, it is significantly difficult to change unless some kind of drastic action takes place that leads the consumer to question what they know in their minds and what they feel in their hearts, right? That is why we talked about the fact that brand equity acts as a bridge, because sometimes when brands are able to build and create this brand knowledge in the mind and the heart of the customer, it becomes some kind of leverage for the brand, such that when they fall on difficult times, they can rely on this knowledge they have created in the minds and hearts of customers to carry them through those difficult times to ensure their survival and sustainability into the foreseeable future. So that being said, we understand how powerful this brand knowledge is, and therefore marketers need an insightful way to be able to represent how this brand knowledge exists in the consumer's memory. Because remember, after understanding customer-based brand equity, we talked about the fact that marketers have two questions they have to answer, isn't it? And the first one was to be able to understand what different brands mean to different consumers, and to be able to answer the question of how the brand knowledge of consumers affects their response to marketing activity. So it is important for the marketer to try and represent how this brand knowledge exists in the consumer's mind or memory, for them to be able to know how it influences their responses and what to do to be able to influence this process. And the first question that someone would ask is, How do we propose to do this? Now, there is one insightful way by which marketers have been doing this over the years, and that is with the help of a model in psychology, which is referred to as the associative network memory model. Now, this model, like I mentioned a moment ago, was developed by psychologists whose purpose was to try and understand how consumers form associations to different entities and individuals and concepts in their minds, right? So when we are talking about the associative network memory model, it basically views the consumer's memory as a network of different nodes and connecting links. Now, these represent the strength of the associations between the nodes in the minds of the consumer, which are formed over time. So by extending this to branding, we are talking about the fact that brand equity exists in the mind of the consumer in the form of these nodes and links. Now, these nodes represent specific concepts, specific ideas, specific characteristics, specific attributes of brands, which are linked together by what we refer to as links that represent the strength of the association between the nodes. So any brand can have a set of attributes in the mind of the consumer, and the strength of the association between these attributes and the brand is what determines the consumer's response to the brand's marketing communication. So a typical example of such an associative network model is that which we see in front of us for Apple, right? And like I said, the nodes represent the different stored information or concepts or attributes about the brand. And then the links are the strength of the association between these nodes. So the links should be strong enough to be able to be associated with specific nodes in the mind of the consumer, such that when they have a consumption experience, the strength of these associations will be enhanced. And therefore, when they move into future consumption experiences, they will attribute the brand to these nodes, which will determine their response, be it to purchase that particular brand, or to recall that particular brand, or to respond to a particular sales promotion that that brand is having, among others, right? So the aim of all the branding activity that the firm engages in through marketing programs is simply to be able to create strong links between these nodes and the brand, such that they are building brand associations over time that will become synonymous with their brand, and therefore automatically elicit certain responses from the consumer when they are faced with a consumption situation in that particular product category. So as you see from the Apple example, the notes that we have for the Apple brand in the minds of most consumers is the fact that Apple is an expensive brand. True or false?
Very true.
And they have built that connection so strongly that whenever people hear the word Apple, one of the first things that comes to their mind is the price of the product, which has been linked to luxury. Right? Again, this particular brand, the half-eaten apple, has been so strongly marketed such that whenever a consumer sees it, it is strongly linked with one particular product that the brand has. Bear in mind that Apple does not have just one kind of product. However, the half-eaten apple, as soon as people see it, will automatically trigger the memory of an iPhone, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. A Mac is not the first thing that will come to your mind when you see the half-eaten apple. Do you agree? Would you agree that a Mac is not the first thing that will come to your mind when you see the half-eaten apple?
Yes, please.
Yes, Doc.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the Mac is not the first thing that comes. The iPhone is the first thing that will come into your mind. Likewise, the Apple logo. Likewise, innovativeness, right? Likewise, the iPod, because they are the only people who create the iPod. Even though it's not the first, Yes, it would also come to your mind. iTunes as well, right? So these are all unique nodes in the minds of various consumers. And like we said, it's a differential effect. So the consumer responses will not be the same. To somebody, the association of this half-eaten apple will be an iPhone. To somebody, it will be the expensiveness aspect. To somebody, it will be the creativity aspect. To somebody, it will be iTunes. To somebody, it will be Steve Jobs. To other people, it could be any combination of these different nodes that we are talking about. And that is why we said in the beginning that firms have to invest in building the brand using their marketing program such that the differential effects can be created, taking cognizance of all the different things that brands mean to different consumers. So with that understanding, let's look at another presentation of these notes and links and how they represent brand associations in the minds of consumers, right? This is another popular brand called Nike, which everyone knows about. Now, Nike has different brand associations in the minds of different consumers. For me, as soon as Nike is mentioned, the first thing that comes into my mind are top athletes. To someone else, it will be the expensiveness. To someone else, it will be the Air technology, because Nike Air is by far their most popular line of sneakers, isn't it? Is it that you don't know about sneakers in this class?
I do. You do,
Madam,
though.
they are not cool
We do.
kids.
They are not cool kids, eh? Right? The Nike Airs are by far their most popular, aside the ones that they commission with the top athletes, right? Which all sell out in almost seconds. For others, it's just about Michael Jordan. So whenever Nike is mentioned, the first thing that comes into their mind is Michael Jordan. And that is because one of Nike's most popular sneakers ever was made in partnership with Michael Jordan, right? Who knows the name of that sneaker?
Yeah, boss.
Nuruddin, do you know the name of that sneaker that they did in partnership with Michael Jordan? Do you just say Air Force, Nuruddin?
Yes.
No, the Air Force is not the one they did in partnership with Michael Jordan. The Air Force is in the Air technology category, but that is not what they did in partnership with Michael Jordan.
Okay. Yeah.
Nuruddin, you have to update yourself. Oh. It says the Air Jordans. Yeah, the Air Jordans. Right? The Air Jordans. Isaac, your hand is up. You can go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you, madam.
Yeah.
First of all, yes, madam, the Air Jordan is a thing in America. It's serious in America.
Exactly.
The second thing I wanted to ask was that with respect to the nodes, is it always that a brand predetermines that this is what it wants to achieve in the customer's mind, or sometimes the customers formulate their own notes about the brand, and then the brand later on, after investigating, decides to work with it?
Both are true. So the firm decides or predetermines what they want to communicate or what notes they want to create in the minds of the consumer. Now, along the line, because we are dealing with human behavior, we cannot predict it. So over time, based on the firm's activities and various occurrences, customers will also form their own notes. And like you said, some brands may decide to pick on those notes and run with them, because they realize that by towing that line, they will be able to leverage on some element of brand equity that has been already created and ride that wave to enhance their success. So firms will always start with some predetermined set of notes that they want to create. And over time, they will work at emphasizing those notes. But as time goes on, customers will also create their own based on the experiences they have with the brand. So Isaac, both of those statements are true.
Thank you, Madam. Madam,
You're
my second
welcome.
question is,
Yeah.
yes, please. Maybe I might be jumping the gun, but I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
In assessing the strength of these links,
Yeah.
Typically, would we use a Leica scale, or how would we measure this?
There are so many techniques.
Okay.
So many techniques, and there's a lecture that is dedicated to this. So like you said, you're jumping the gun a bit. When we get there, we'll learn about these techniques. You can use surveys. You can use qualitative techniques. Now, because we are dealing with consumer behavior, surveys are used sparingly. We use more of experimentation to understand these concepts, because we are dealing with concepts that reside in the mind and the heart of the consumer. So we use experimentation to be able to ensure that we can get to the core of what is going on in terms of the thought processes and understanding of the consumer. So we use everything from projective techniques to neurological techniques. We'll learn about all these things, right? Because we have to be able to get to the point of being able to independently assess what the consumer is thinking and feeling without them being aware. Because you know, consumers, once they are aware that they are being monitored, or once they are aware that they are being studied, have the tendency to modify their behavior.
Yes, very true, Madam.
Good. So the survey technique we use sparingly is used sparingly because they are able to influence their responses in that regard. So you realize that you do a survey, sometimes you are collecting data, and then the consumer will independently decide to do strongly agree, all the way from question 1 to the end. Because they are aware you are surveying them and they are deciding how to go about responding to the questionnaire.
Okay.
But with independent assessment techniques like the projective techniques and the ones where we use various tools and machines to scan consumer brains and scan their physiological and psychological responses, they cannot control those ones. So those ones are more objective in terms of telling us what the consumer is thinking and feeling than using a quantitative technique like a survey.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam.
You're welcome, Isaac. Nuruddin, go ahead, your hand is up.
Yes, Doc. Mine is a comment. Yeah. Comment based on the question Isaac asked.
Yeah.
So I think that first of all, just like you are, giving us an insight into branding. Yeah. Branding should be deliberate.
Yeah.
It's something. How do you want to be identified? That is the brand identity.
Yeah.
So the firm has to initiate that.
Yeah.
And then they can engage the reaction. So the equity is based on how the customers perceive the value they want to give to your, the offerings you are giving.
Yeah.
You are making deliver that product. So if you are able to deliver it, then those associations can be confirmed that yes, this is luxurious because it has been delivered. The promise has been delivered. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that is essentially it, right? But there have also been instances where brands have not actually put any thought processes to building brand equity. They have barely introduced their brand onto the market, but some consumers find some kind of unique association with the brand as a result of some experience they have, and they pick the brand and run with it. So they create and develop the nodes on behalf of the brand and build the equity for the brand initially. So you realize that some brands out of nowhere all of a sudden become very popular overnight. Have you experienced that? Have you observed this?
Yes, Madam. TikTok.
Yeah, out of nowhere, right? And that is because some individuals had some unique experiences and they thought, no, this is something that they have to share with other people, right? And these usually end up working in favor of the brand because then, like Nuruddin is saying, even though they had a plan and they had a thought process, they will not have to expend all that effort in selling this plan that they had, because the consumers have already done some of the mileage for them. So they just have to ride the wave that the consumers have started and build upon what has already been given them to create something better. Right? So for the longest time, people did not know that TikTok was owned by a Chinese person. Are you aware TikTok is owned by a Chinese person?
Yes, yes.
No, I just found out.
Yeah, a lot of people still don't know. And that is
Until they
because
had
the
a problem with Donald
Americans
Trump.
took it and ran with it. So it became an American thing. And everybody in the country who was an influencer, who was a celebrity, wanted to be on TikTok, wanted to have a TikTok account, because that was the wave, right? And if you were on TikTok, you were popular. If you were on TikTok, you were cool. If you were on TikTok, you had latched onto the latest innovation in social media communication, right? Clancy, you said Cardi B became famous overnight. No, Cardi B had been building her fame and popularity for a long time.
Yes, but then she wasn't popular until she released Bodak Yellow. That was
She
what
was
got
very
her.
popular. She was very popular, but
She
not as
was in love and
position.
hip hop, but a lot of people
Yeah.
didn't know.
People knew, but they didn't know her for music, though.
Yellow came out. And then,
Yes, but they didn't know her for music.
so it was what
You
about
get it?
24K's Golden Mood? Because a lot of people do not know. I think for me, or for a lot of people outside America, people
Good.
didn't know about Cardi until she released Bodak Yellow.
Good.
Because every time you talk about her,
For those who were
maybe in
outside of
America, people know
America,
her.
who were not familiar with the Love and Hip Hop franchise.
Yes. So for them,
Huh.
when she released Bodak Yellow, it put her on the radar.
Yeah. But for those who were Love and Hip Hop fans, it was not surprising.
Yeah, they knew
Because
her.
on the show, she was working on her music career. Even though she had not hit yet.
Yes.
Good. Right? So these are all the unique ways in which possible associations can be created. And you realize that based on the discussions we are having, like I mentioned earlier, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah. Because some firms can plan, they can plan everything, and it still doesn't work out well. That is why a lot of these actions are backed by copious amounts of research and data. Because without that, you cannot guarantee to some extent that your strategy or your tactic will yield some level of success. Because 100% success is never guaranteed. So you need to make sure that you are making these decisions backed by some form of data to be able to ensure that at least you can attain some level of success with what you're implementing, right? So this is a basic model of possible associations, right, which we can refer to as a brand map. Now let's look at a more complicated brand map in the mind of a consumer. And this is for the McDonald's brand. So you realize that the notes themselves come in various sizes and strengths, isn't it? Such that you can have one node that is connected to several other nodes and has other sub nodes under it. And as you can see, McDonald's with their golden arches, right, have various nodes, including the fact that they are connected with value. They are connected with meals. They are connected with service. They are connected with kids, fun, and family. Then they are connected with social involvement, right? Now, the meals are also ultimately connected with quality. They are connected with other brands, and they are connected with products, right? So under the meals, there are certain brands that even stand out. The McMuffin is very popular in the United States, but the Big Mac is more popular all over the world. True or false?
True.
Yeah. Who here doesn't know
Madam,
about
many
the
of us
Big
don't
Mac?
know.
You don't know about the Big Mac?
Madam, McDonald's is not in Ghana, so many have not experienced it.
Yeah, but
Are you speaking for us?
McDonald's is still not in Ghana, but some of us who live in Ghana have experienced everything about McDonald's. because their branding and brand communication is global. So let's do a quick survey. Who here had not heard about McDonald's till this lecture? Please show by hand. If you had not heard about it at all before till this lecture. Isaac. Your hypothesis has been disproved.
Yes, madam.
Good. Because it's a global brand. And anyone who has not heard anything about McDonald's at all knows about the Big Mac. That big burger with the double layers of meat and plenty cheese. Right? So you realize that as marketers, we can develop the simple brand map with the basic associations, which is equally good, or to get a more complicated, more complex, more in-depth understanding about the various connections that consumers have with our brands, we can develop a more complicated brand map like this one. And these are not built anyhow. These are built, like I said, backed by actual data that is generated using these various techniques, some of which I mentioned, which we are going to discuss in a subsequent session. So these are backed by studies that have been done on consumers to try and understand what is going on in their minds with regard to the McDonald's brand. So as you can see, there is no limit to the extent of associations. And here we are only seeing the positive associations. But you realize that some brands also have permanently negative associations associated with them. Are you aware?
Yes.
Yes.
Example.
Men's Gold.
Even ECG.
ECG. Aside the fact that they are associated with giving us power, which we are always happy when we have electricity, they are almost always tagged with the fact that they are also not reliable. And they can take your light at any time. True or false?
Pages with that announcement. True.
True.
So the associations can be both positive and negative. And as brand managers, we need to be cognizant of this, because while you are working to create the positive associations, there may be some negative associations that may also be created about your brand, independent of your efforts. So you have to also make sure that you are doing everything that you can through your marketing programs to counter these negative associations that are being created, because you don't want them to become permanent. True or false?
True.
Good.
True.
Right? So you can't be a myopic marketer and just use your myopic vision to look at the positives and the good sides. Because a myopic vision will mean that you are not holistically looking at the associations that consumers have when it comes to your brand, which means that there may be some negative associations that will be countering the effect of the positive associations that you are creating, which is unacceptable. So you have to look at it holistically, both in terms of the positives and the negatives, and make sure that the positives that you are creating, you are also actively creating marketing programs to counter the negatives, so that your brand can consistently continue to grow stronger in terms of equity. Good, GCB is another one. For Men's Gold, they had the positive for a very long time, right? And I think they did not see what was about to happen, because if they did, they could have put in place measures to counter the negative associations that have been formed now, which can never be cleared. And because of that, anything that the supposed CEO or his associated companies and organizations come up with ends up getting tagged with that negative association. True or false?
True.
Yeah, so Xylophone Media and all the Xylophone companies have that negative association that Men's Gold has attached to them. thereby emphasizing what I was saying a moment ago, that the negatives can sometimes overshadow your positives. So you can't afford to ignore them and pretend like they don't exist. But for McDonald's is their kitchen messes. Yeah, people have talked about it. There are whole Twitter threads about the kitchen situation in McDonald's, right? But those negatives have not been able to outweigh the positives, have they, Pafo?
Very true, Doc.
Yeah, because they are working overtime on the positives. Once again, emphasizing what I said a moment ago, right? So as brand managers and marketers, we cannot afford to be myopic. We need to see the whole picture and do our best to highlight the strengths and then diminish the weaknesses. So that is it for the possible associations with brands in the minds of consumers and the nature of brand maps. So with that understanding, let's look at the sources of brand equity, right? Now, CBB occurs, like we said, when the customer has formed some kind of brand knowledge in their minds as a result of their experiences, which influences their responses, right? So essentially, we can say customer-based brand equity occurs when the consumer has a high level of familiarity with the brand, because we said that these experiences are built over time. So over time, the customer, through their experiences, will build some strong, favorable, and unique brand associations in memory, as we have just seen with the brand map, right? And these associations are exhibited in two main forms when it comes to brand knowledge. The first one is through brand awareness, and the second one is through brand image. So when we say a customer is exhibiting some kind of brand associations in memory in the form of brand knowledge, they usually exhibit this physically through brand awareness and brand image, right? Brand awareness as exhibited in the customer's reactions, and brand image as exhibited in the customer's perceptions about the brand. So let's take these two components of brand knowledge and break them down, starting from brand awareness. So when we say brand awareness, what are we talking about? Brand awareness is related to the strength of the brand node or trace in memory, right? So when we talk about brand awareness, we are talking about the fact that consumers' attributes in their memory in the form of the nodes are strongly attached to that brand, such that whenever that node or attribute is mentioned or comes up, that brand is the first thing that pops in our minds, right? So when we talk about brand awareness, it is all about how the consumer is able to identify the brand under different conditions as a result of the strength of the nodes in their memory, which are linked to that brand. Nuruddin, you said evoke sets. Good. Brand awareness aids in creating an evoke set. Because like we said, these nodes and attributes created in the memory of the consumer can be linked to various brands. And usually the marketer's aim is to make sure that that node is primarily associated with their brand, making their brand the preferred brand by the consumer. That is what brand awareness is about. It's all about strengthening the nodes between the nodes in the consumer's memory, between the attributes, between specific attributes and your brand in the mind of the consumer, right? And when you are able to do that excellently, it will mean that the customer will be able to identify your brand under different conditions every time those specific nodes are brought up. So you realize that firms that are able to do this excellently end up making nodes that are so strongly associated with their brand that whenever those nodes come up, their brand name is synonymously or automatically mentioned along with that node. And we see this happening around us all the time, right? Now, the counterpart component is brand image. which refers to consumers' perceptions about a brand, right? Which is reflected by brand associations that may reflect the characteristics either of the product or aspects independent of the product. So you realize that, like we saw in the Apple example, right? The associations to the iPhone have automatically become associations to the Apple brand, such that because the iPhone is an innovative product, Apple as a company has automatically become synonymous with innovation, isn't it?
Yes, Doc.
Good, right? So this is a typical example of how brand image is created and how it can be reflected through the characteristics of the product. Again, it can also be reflected through aspects that are independent of the product. So for the longest time, even though the iPhone and its association with innovation led to Apple as a company being associated with innovation, Apple as a company also had an image because of who their CEO was, isn't it?
Yes.
Who was their CEO?
Is it then or now? Because Steve Jobs.
Then.
Okay. Steve Jobs.
Okay, and what was Steve Jobs known for?
He was known in the innovation technology stuff.
Good.
Well known, respected. Yes.
Good.
And that's
good. So the respect that they had for him as a CEO also translated into people's image of Apple as a company, isn't it?
Yes.
Good. So it was
trust.
Good. So it was independent of the products of the company. So you realize that the strength of Apple as a brand came not only from the products that they had, but also from the kind of CEOs that they've had in the past, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, creating a very strong brand image. And to date, even though Steve Jobs is long gone, people still have that same trust and respect for Apple because of the respect and trust they had for Steve Jobs. Even though the current CEO also has his own clout and his own followers, Apple is still benefiting from the reputation that Steve Jobs had. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So that is a typical example of how brand image can be reflected by brand associations that reflect both characteristics of the product and also aspects independent of the product. So now that we have understood this, let's delve deeper into the individual components, starting from brand awareness. Now, brand awareness consists of two main dimensions, brand recognition and brand recall. Brand recall is basically the consumer's ability to confirm prior exposure to the brand when given the brand as a cue. So when you give a consumer any aspect of the brand as a cue, because they have been exposed to the brand in the past, they can be able to use that aspect of the brand to tell you immediately which brand it is. And I think we did an example of that last week in our lecture, isn't it? I presented you with cues from specific brands, and you were automatically able to recognize them, which confirms prior exposure, right? So that's brand recognition.
Yeah.
Again, brand recall. It's all about the consumer's ability to retrieve the brand from memory. So it's not just enough for the customer to recognize the brand. They have to also be able to recall it. How many times have you seen a logo somewhere and you're like, I know which brand this is. I know this logo, I've seen it somewhere before, but you can't remember the name of the brand. It has happened to you before, hasn't it?
Barcelona.
Yeah. Good, right? And when it happens that way, it means that the brand's marketing programs are not very strong enough to aid you to recall. So it means that brand marketing communications can fulfill certain aspects of the brand script and not be able to fulfill others. And like you rightly said right now, in the case of the Barcelos, they were able to fulfill the recognition aspect of the script, but the recall aspect was a bit tough, right? So when it comes to recall, it is the sister counterpart to recognition because it is not enough for the customer to be able to confirm prior exposure by means of a cue. They also have to have the ability to retrieve the brand from memory when the given product category is brought up, right? And in retrieving it from memory, they'll be able to identify what brand the product belongs to, the needs that it can fulfill, and this will ultimately lead them to decide whether or not they want to purchase this particular brand. Because recognition alone is not enough to get a customer to purchase a brand. They have to be able to recall from memory the associations they have to this brand, to convince themselves that this brand is indeed what they need to satisfy the need that they have identified in this category, right? So, like we did last week, let's do a brand awareness exercise. This time it's going to be a bit more difficult because we are not going to use local brands. So I want to see how your brand awareness is for more multinational brands. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So let's start. The first one. Which brand is this?
Puma.
Oh, good. Finally. Okay, let's do another one. This one is a bit difficult.
Hermes.
Hey, who did Hermes? Bafo.
Nuruddin did.
Nuruddin. Hey, was it Nuruddin or Bafo?
Sounded like
Bafo.
Come on, Bafo has to
Why
know
are
about
you
the
sure?
names. Hey, Bafo, wait. Why, do you have a sister or a mom or
Doc,
or a girlfriend?
I've been trying to learn this brand thing, so I've seen it. And Hermes is better.
Please, who doesn't know about Hermes in this class? Please, if you don't know, show by hand. Oh, Naomi, you don't know about Hermes. Oh, Manaf. Oh, Shirley, Alima too. Oh, wow. Okay. So Hermes is a couture design company, right? And they make one of the most expensive bags in the world known as the Birkin bag. Have you heard of the Birkin?
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. The Birkin bag is the most expensive and exclusive handbag in the world. You can't just walk into a shop and buy it. It's a handbag that is offered to you for purchase. So you have to be eligible to buy a Birkin before they can even invite you to buy one. So those who have not heard about the brand, this is how exclusive it is. It's really exclusive, right? So they are known for the Birkin, right? And like Akuya is saying, they have the Birkin slippers as well. And then they have very expensive scarves as well, Hermes scarves. Their scarves are also exclusive. They make them one of a kind. Right? So Hermes is a very high-end couture label.
But Doc, Granda, it looks like people are trying to imitate their slippers. So there's a lot in the market, but that's not the original.
That is it.
And the
But
guys
you see,
do have a belt.
good. But you see, those who know the originals know that there's no way you can buy it like that.
Yeah.
You see, so when I see it all over the market and people are wearing it, as soon as I see it, I know it's a knockoff. Because the original
It's very expensive.
Exactly. Right? So well done, Bafo. Wow. Okay. Let's do another one. What about this one? This one is very popular.
Cocoa Pops.
Cocoa Pop.
Yes. Kay likes Cocoa Puffs. Good. And then let's do the last one. This one will be a bit difficult.
Ferrari.
Bafo, I think you are into very high-end stuff. Is it that you have an ambition
Doc,
to
don't
become a
you see his
billionaire in
DP?
future?
Look, I want to produce an
high-end.
high-end product.
Yeah.
If you see Buff's DPs and his statuses he has been posting,
Come on, Bafo has
Hey, clear.
ambition. He wants to be a millionaire in future.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Right?
Doc, I'll come for tips.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you anytime.
Yes.
right? So this is brand recognition, right? You are able to immediately pull out the brand logo and the name from memory, and you are able to, you know, the associations. That is what excellent branding looks like. Because at the basic level, your brand is supposed to have awareness. People should be able to recall it and recognize it when it is presented in the form of any brand cue that the brand has, right? Fancy, you said Rolex products. Exactly. Rolex too is one of those very popular, well-recognized brands across the globe. However, they're also suffering from the imitation thing. So me, whenever I see a watch with Rolex on it, I know. Depending on who I see it on.
They usually,
But Doc, the funny thing is the imitation ones are very expensive as well.
Exactly.
it also depends. But yeah.
Exactly. So you ask yourself, why am I spending so much to buy an imitation?
No, sometimes it's because the original, they actually invite you to buy.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So there's no way you will get an original to buy. So why spend all the money to buy an imitation when definitely people who know when they see will know it's an imitation? I mean, that's my issue.
Exactly.
I'd rather buy a high street brand and know I'm wearing a high street brand. I'd rather buy a Next watch and know I'm wearing a Next watch, or a Boohoo watch, or an ASOS watch, and know that's what I'm wearing. That's why I buy a fake Rolex.
Thank you.
You bob.
Yeah, I'll buy a Timex. I like Timex watches a lot. I'm okay
Simple.
with that.
You are free.
You're free.
Nobody watching when whisper that, hey, sister, Nasa naughty.
Thank you.
Wow, they want to be a channel.
Right, so that is brand recognition. Well done, everyone. So,
And Doc, for your information, I've
Yeah.
been monitoring the way you dress and I like it.
hey,
Yeah.
I'm shy.
Hey, serious.
I'm not the only one. No.
Oh, yes, we are all here.
And
Let
you
us
are
start coming out of
classing
our
them all. They are all watching.
Oh
you.
yeah. Oh,
We are watching.
I'm humble.
We are all
Doc-
monitoring
Doc has
you.
known
Yeah. Want to
Doc
be
has
like
known
him
that
when we
I've
grow.
admired him since.
Thank you, Mida.
Thank you so much. I'm humble. Thank you.
Doc is a cool kid.
Amen. Amen. May God continue to help me to stay cool.
Amen.
No, but Doc,
Yes, Nuruddin.
yes, you are applying the branding stuff you're teaching us, so it's
Oh,
understandable.
Thank you.
Branding and not be branded yourself.
All right, so that's for brand recognition, right? So let's try recall. Now, recall is the next level for brand recognition because, like I mentioned, some brands who do very well at recall end up getting themselves elicited when it comes to a particular need category, even without presenting a specific cue. Such that if I mention the category, the brand's name would automatically come to mind, given how well they have done with building their brand equity. So let's do a quick brand recall exercise and see if we can prove this assertion, right? So let's start first with beer. When I mention beer, what brand comes to mind?
Wow.
Automatically, right?
Yeah.
Because they've done very well building the brand over time. Let's do another one. Electronic appliances.
Baffle. Hey, sorry. Samsung.
Oh,
Settled.
I nearly said Baffle. Samsung.
you actually did.
Sorry, in the olden days.
Tony.
Sony.
Sony.
Sorry.
Okay, so Sony like back then.
Yes,
But
in
Samsung
the
is
olden
very
days, yeah,
popular
back then.
now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, Samsung is now
Yeah.
on top.
Yeah. And then
And
if you
high
decide to
sense
ask
in Ghana.
Hisense,
Nasco
good.
too.
LG.
Nasco.
Yeah.
LG, NASCO, right? So you realize that all these brands, it means all these brands are doing very well in terms of building the brand equity, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Because NASCO has their people, Samsung have their people, and you know NASCO is a subsidiary of the Samsung company.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Good,
Oh wow.
right? They are
I had no
targeted.
idea.
Yeah, Samsung is the high end, and then the NASCO is the middle to lower end.
Okay. Hey, these people.
So NASCO is owned by Samsung, and Media as well. Media is also owned by Samsung. So where you have the very high-end Samsung products into the hundreds of thousands of Ghana cedis, you can get a middle level to lower level version in Media or NASCO for a comparative price. Right? So that is for electronic appliances. So electronic appliances, we can see that there are several competitors. Isaac, people don't talk about TCL anymore. I don't know why. Have you used one before, Isaac? I haven't heard people giving real reviews about TCL appliances.
No, madam, please, I've not used it before.
Yeah, I don't hear people talking much about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when they started, they made a lot of noise and they sponsored a lot of programs. So
yes,
there was a lot of buzz about them for some time, but the brand didn't really stick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hisense is more popular than TCL.
Yes, please. True. It's very true.
Great. Let's do another one. When I say bank, which brand comes?
ABSA.
TV.
Ecobank. Standchart.
GCB.
GCB is down.
Formally, when you say bank, it's
Bank
GCB.
of Ghana.
What has GCB done to
I
you?
mean, Bank of Ghana is the ultimate, though.
Bank of Ghana.
Bank of Ghana is known for long queues. You go and stand there. Nobody will mind you.
Hey,
that's why I miss the former Unibank.
You bank with the Bank of Ghana, Nuruddin. Wow.
Cody, where do you
bank the Bank of Ghana?
Nuruddin is wonderful.
No, he means GCB, right?
I started with GCB. No, I mean GCB, not Bank of Ghana.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Bank of Ghana.
I was coming to say that. Oh, so then you transfer your money to the
big man.
So you realize that we have just confirmed that positive and negative association thing we were talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
People were quickly able to recall GCB, but not for the right reasons.
Yes, I started with them, GCB.
GCB for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
While they were mentioning the others like the ABSA and the CBGs and the EcoBanks and the Standchart because they are doing something right. So it means GCB still has a lot of work to do. In terms of, because they've been in existence the longest in Ghana.
Yeah.
So they've had ample time to correct this notion. And if they still are struggling with it, then GCB as a brand needs to think. Their rebranding was a welcome effort, but I don't think it fixed the problem totally.
No.
And they need to do more.
Yes, they have to pay attention to the service they give. Service
exactly. It's not just about fixing the outside.
Changing logos and stuff. No, it's the service.
Yeah.
The old ladies, they are too much.
Yeah, they have to change all of them.
Once.
This is dangerous. This is dangerous proposition.
Oh, but it's true. When you go, the old ones there, they're talking. When you go there on phone, they're talking about funeral.
They are coming there.
I think we have to share this recording with GCB so that they'll be able to see where the true issues lie and try and address them. Yeah.
So their problem is they feel they are everywhere. Almost every village has GCB there. So they feel they already have the numbers, so they don't have time to get more people.
They are relying on past glory.
Yeah. Yes.
Forgetting that these new banks are also catching up with the network coverage.
Yes.
So in no time, I'm sure we will have another bank in Ghana that has all this coverage that we are talking about. In any case, people are now doing a lot of online banking and mobile banking. So in a few years to come, GCB and that old leverage they thought they had in terms of network coverage may not exist anymore. So they need to start reevaluating their brand positioning. Otherwise, all they will have is the state backing that they have as being the nation's first bank and the one with the most coverage. But as time goes on, they will end up becoming obsolete. Like people are already complaining about the old women who are there.
and their slogan is very interesting. We serve you better.
Yes. Meanwhile,
but they don't serve us better.
tangential to the actual service that they offer. GCV has suffered. I think we should give them a break right now.
We should give them a break.
Yes, small one. The bashing first can continue at a later date. All right, so that is for bank. Let's try another one. Washing powder.
Omo.
This one was unanimous, wasn't it?
So clean.
Good. So you realize that in some categories, some brands have done an excellent job of standing out. While in other categories, the competition is a bit more keen. So there's more than one brand that comes to mind. And that is a good thing, because competition always means that people are forced to step up their branding, step up their marketing, step up their service delivery, because they want to remain competitive, right? So that's a good one. Let's do another one. Water.
Baltic.
Standard water.
Special ice.
Now you people are just being you are throwing everything in, including the bath water and the kitchen sink and all the things there. You are being typical consumers. Right? But initially it was a unanimous response. It was Baltic, right?
Doc, apart from that too, sometimes some brands are known in certain areas.
Good. And among certain classes of consumer.
Yes.
Right. So if we go to the village now, Baltic may not come to mind.
No.
Yes.
Maybe specialized sachet water.
My area at home is ice drop.
Aha, you see. So you're very right. That is why we were talking about the fact that all of this branding activity we are doing has to be backed by data. And that is why you will find brands like Unilever being smart enough to know that because of these multiple responses from different customer groups and customer segments, you cannot have one product in a whole products category. So they have multiple. So Unilever has Omo washing powder, but they also have Sunlight washing powder. True or false?
True.
To be able to target different groups. Right? Nuruddin, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yes, Doc, it's just a comment on the water issue. I think that sometimes it is normally regionally based. Like when you go to certain regions, the product are not the same. You go to some village, you won't even see all the ones we are mentioning there, ice drop and Baltic and all those things, something else.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I don't know if I am right, but I'm looking at it in terms of the segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So it's not like you're going to sell to everybody, but you are looking at your capacity, your strength, what you can offer.
Good.
And your outlook. Do you want to serve the whole, maybe Accra or Greater Accra, or you want to serve only maybe Dansoman area and the rest? Exactly. What are you setting out to do? Stuff, something like that.
Yeah. Very well said, Nuruddin.
Thank you, Doc.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at another one. TV station.
GTV.
Now you are just
CCTV.
GTV.
Now you are just being sarcastic. GTV really.
Atenka TV.
Which one is that?
No TV. CCTV.
Adum TV.
Let's be honest. TV3 is miles ahead, right?
Yes.
Before the others.
Before is GTV.
And they also benefited from what GCB is enjoying, that they think they will enjoy forever, which was the nationwide coverage.
Yes.
And GTV didn't see the revolution in the television industry coming.
Yes.
And right now they have been left so far behind that it's so difficult for them to catch up.
Doc, that's the reason why they want TV license. Don't get.
They started trying to collect that thing since my grandmother's time.
They will not get. In this modern world, they are still showing old content.
Yeah. I appreciate documentaries because it helps me learn a lot about the history of Africa and Ghana. But apart from that, the programming is simply nothing to write home about.
Look, last Saturday they were showing a 1992 movie in this 2020 era.
It's okay. It's just like a bit of, you know,
time machine, going back in time.
Yeah.
No, Doc, if you're going back in time, you must show blockbusters. Someone, no one, it didn't even hit. Those ones.
This is about preference.
No, but I
maybe you
think
don't
the
like the
target
movie.
audience are.
I think they are not us. They are the older people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They are the older people. They are not innovating. They are not innovating.
Yes. Doc, that's the issue. They are not innovating.
Yeah, they are not innovating. And that will ultimately lead to their downfall. Because right now they are really struggling. They are barely keeping it together. All right. Let's do one last one. Wax print.
GTP.
New
style. Holland.
Did somebody say new style?
Yes.
Good.
It's GTP.
So
yes.
This goes back to the brand map we were talking about, like the McDonald's Big Mac situation.
Yes.
Good. The brand has been able to market one of its products so well that it has also gained so much popularity in terms of strength of association in the mind of consumers. So GTP comes up, a new style came up. Meanwhile, they have other sub-brands as well. There's GTP. Good, there's Adepa, and there's another one too. I've forgotten the name. It will come, right? But new style stands out.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, you see someone said Holland.
Yes.
Yes.
But what is the brand itself?
Is it?
The brand itself.
I'm not sure. Is it
the brand itself is Vlisco.
Vlisco.
For the longest time, the brand itself has been Vlisco. But because the sub-brand is Hollandies, and that is what was publicized, that is what everybody became comfortable with, it has massively become known as Holland. But the brand itself is Vlisco. Interesting, isn't it?
Very.
And this Holland came about as a result of the fact that the market women who were selling it were using it as a unique selling proposition. That this fabric comes from Holland and it is quality and so independent of the company Vlisco, the Ghanaian market women selling the cloth created a whole identity and association for the brand by calling it Holland. And it has stuck throughout the years. Now, if you are being engaged and you don't have at least one piece of Holland in your suitcase, the old women will start asking questions. Among the array of cloth that is presented as part of the engagement, you have to have at least one Holland inside. Are you aware? Those who are married here, where are the married women?
Yeah. Doc, we are aware.
Hey, manager.
So gentlemen, when you are saving, remember, Holland is not cheap.
Yes.
GTP is also not cheap.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't buy high target. Otherwise,
no, now we don't wear high target.
High
target is for simple dresses and tops.
The one that you wear once, you don't wear again.
Yes, but if you want to wear something like a carbon slate, is either new style,
Vlisco or GTP. Thank you. Tell them.
Yes.
Tell them.
Your branding is important, so you can't wear high target.
Thank you. So, gentlemen.
Come on.
Thank you very much. You are branded in our pocket, right?
Well noted. Well noted.
Gentlemen, you have
you need to start saving a lot.
Saving 6 pieces.
I'll go for my mom's phone.
Okay, we are very aware. We are very aware.
Well
we are
noted.
taking more notes.
Great. So that's for brand recall, right? So from this exercise, I believe we've all understood the importance of brand awareness, specifically brand recognition and brand recall, because without that, no one knows about your brand, and your brand will not even come to mind when they have a need for a product in your specific brand category. So these are key and very important for any brand that is trying to build equity over time. Nuruddin, your hand is up. Is it the old one or it's a new one?
Old one, sorry, let me put it down.
All right. So that brings us to the end of the discussion on brand awareness. Now let's delve into brand image. Now, when it comes to brand image, we can only proceed to build a good image for our brand if we have been able to guarantee brand awareness. Because if you do not have brand awareness in the form of recall and recognition, building an image will not matter because nobody knows about you to even care how they perceive you, right? So you have to be able to ensure that as a firm, you have been able to build a strong brand awareness and then move on to the next step of crafting a good brand image for yourself. Now, in crafting a good brand image, firms use marketing programs to link strong, favorable, and unique associations to their brand in the memory of the consumer. Now, these associations can either be in the form of brand attributes, like we have mentioned when we're discussing the brand map, in the form of innovativeness, coolness, attentiveness, uniqueness, top athletes in the case of Nike, among others, or benefits that a particular product offers, right? So you realize that most of the brands that we know of today that we can easily recall and recognize, it's because of specific attributes that they possess or certain benefits that they provide in their specific brand or product category. So let's take these individual links and associations that are developed to build strong or good brand image, starting from the strength of the brand associations. Now, we are looking at the strength of the brand associations because the more deeply a person thinks about product information and relates it to their existing brand knowledge, the stronger the resulting brand association. Meaning that over time, we need to, as marketers, work to improve customers' brand knowledge about our brand by providing them with consistent amounts of information. So you realize that regardless of how popular some of the brands we know are and how well they are doing in terms of sales, they still continue to advertise from time to time, isn't it?
Yes.
And that is because they want to continue to strengthen the association of their brand with the specific attributes and benefits that they communicate in the minds of the consumer. And this is because the more the direct experiences that the consumer has with the brand, the stronger the associations the consumer will have with the brand and these specific attributes and benefits in their minds. So we want to make sure that at any point in time, we are having some kind of contact with the consumer to increase the amount of information and experiences the consumer has, so that the associations in their minds will be strong. And whenever they have a need for a product in our specific brand category, we will be the preferred brand that they will choose, right? Therefore, we are saying that the strength of the association is very influential when it comes to the consumer deciding which brand to choose, provided they are able to accurately interpret the communication we are putting across to them. So the strength of brand associations is very, very important if the brand is to remain relevant and build good or strong brand equity over time. Now, next, we need to talk about the favorability of these associations as well, because like I said, we need to make sure that the associations are favorable enough to convince the consumer that we indeed, as a brand, possess the attributes and the benefits that can satisfy their needs and wants. And like we mentioned, as marketers, we cannot afford to have a myopic view and just focus on the positives and the strengths. But we need to also look at the negatives that could come up and affect our ability to communicate this favorability that we are talking about in terms of brand associations. So we need to be cognizant of this fact and also of the fact that brand associations are situation and context dependent. Like Nuruddin was mentioning the other time about how specific brands are relevant to people in specific contexts and not relevant to those in other contexts. So that being said, the brand associations can vary according to what the consumer wants to achieve in that particular consumption situation. Or it would vary depending on the consumer's context and situation. So a brand like Voltic bottled water may not be relevant to someone in a rural area, given their situation and context. Bottled water is not exactly what they go for when they want water to drink. So it would be another form of water, perhaps in a sachet, like standard water, which based on their situation and context makes more sense when it comes to consumption decisions. So that means that brand associations will not be equally important or favorable to all groups of customers. Hence, the importance of the STP process, being the segmentation, targeting, and positioning process, so that we can segment the market and target relevant consumers who will have some high degree of meaning and identify with our brand and its attributes and benefits. And that is for favorability of brand associations. Next, we need to talk about uniqueness, because in terms of strength and favorability, it is not something that can clearly differentiate us from our competition, given that, like we saw in the brand recognition example, several brands have the ability to create strong brand associations as well as favorable brand associations. However, it is the unique selling proposition that we offer as a brand that will give consumers a compelling reason to choose us over our competitor. So that means that we as marketers have a unique job to create differences that will set us apart from our competition and give us a competitive edge. And this is usually done in the form of various elements of the marketing mix, including product design, distribution network, pricing, and most importantly, in promotion. So you realize that when it comes to brand communication and promotion, brands either explicitly communicate their differences from their competitors by using direct comparisons, while others will do so in a more subtle manner by highlighting it implicitly, depending on how audacious they are as a brand. And across the world, we see multinational corporations going at each other in advertisements. For instance, KFC and Burger King and McDonald's and Burger King are always going at each other in their adverts. Are you aware? Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Yeah. Burger King would do an advert and put their burger side by side with a McDonald's burger or a KFC burger and talk about how their burger is better. Right? So this is where the comparison is based on performance-related attributes. Exactly, Manaf, MTN and Vodafone always going at each other in terms of performance. While they can also use non-performance related attributes and benefits to compare themselves with their competitors and show how they are better than their competitors, right? So another organization that does this a lot in the media, or another pair of multinational corporations who do this a lot, is Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Are you aware?
Yes.
Yeah, they're always going at each other, right? And to demonstrate this, I want to show you a most recent advert in which Pepsi went after Coca-Cola using these explicit and implicit nuances that we are talking about to compare their attributes, right? So I'm going to share the screen now so that we can view that advert quickly, and then we'll come back and discuss it. Okay, please, can you see the screen?
Yes, please.
Yes, Doc.
Yes, please.
Can you hear the sound?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's start from the beginning. Now, I want you to analyze every aspect of this advert, right? Because they use a lot of implicit communication. And then we'll discuss it. So let's go.
I see you red door and I want to paint it black. No colors anymore, I want them to turn black. I see your red door and I want to paint it black. I paint the red door black, dance floor black. I'm in my own lane, unapologetic and I do my own thing. Got my own brain. No colors anymore, I want to paint it black.
Did you get that? One small, okay. So let me reduce the size so that it will help with the imagery. Okay, so one small. Again, look at the subtle implicit communication that's going on, and then we'll discuss.
I see you red door and I want to paint it black. No colors anymore, I want them to turn black. I see your red door and I want to paint it black. I paint the red door black, dance floor black. I'm in my own lane, unapologetic, and I do my own thing. Got my own brain. No colors anymore, I want to paint it black. I see you red door and I want to.
Okay, I hope you got it now.
Yes, please.
So let's discuss the implicit comparisons that they were making. All right, so who wants to go first?
Doc, I'll try.
Okay, Pia, go ahead.
Okay, so for the video, it shows that they are trying to depict that Pepsi is better than Coke in terms of Coke has a lot of the sugar content in Coke. So when they drank the Coke, the whole, energy that was coming in from them. But then when they drank the Pepsi, when they changed to Pepsi, there was this, calmness, and I think that should. I think I've changed it. So what I took from it is they are trying to depict Coke and Pepsi is better than Coke in the sense that Coke has more sugar than Pepsi.
Good.
And then, so it made them stable when they drank the Coke. But then when they drank the Pepsi, there was this energy that came out from them after they took the Pepsi.
Yeah. Good. So that's implicit, isn't it?
Yes, please.
Great. Nuruddin, go ahead.
Yes, Doc. They are depicting Coke to be something boring, uninspiring.
Thank you.
Not nice.
Yeah.
And then when they switch to Pepsi, very vibrant, energetic, people, they came in variety, and people are having fun. It's cool to take Pepsi more than Coke. Coke is boring. Tempting.
Yeah, like Ikuya mentioned, the switch brought up more energy, right? Yeah. Good, right? Manal, go ahead.
Madam, if you check the colors too.
Yeah.
Coke was red and Pepsi black.
Yeah.
And also in the lyrics, there was, I see your red and I want to paint it black.
Thank you. Directly attacking them, isn't it?
Yes.
Very good observation, madam. Great. Anyone else? Francis, your line is very unclear.
Doc.
Okay. Yes, Sophia.
Can we also say that when you look at the video very well, it wasn't really Coke that was written, but it was cola.
Exactly. And that is for ethical reasons, right? You can't go directly naming and attacking a particular brand like that. But you can use specific cues to let consumers know that this is the brand you're talking about. So you realize that, like she said, they wrote cola and they used the color red, like Manaf said, and then they used the Coca-Cola's white swish too, isn't it?
Yes.
So implicitly, we know they are talking about Coca-Cola, but it's not very explicit.
Yeah.
Because if it's explicit, it can attract legal sanctions.
Yeah.
Good. So very good observation, Ikea. Right?
Thank you.
So this is a classic example of how brands can implicitly communicate their uniqueness in terms of their attributes and product benefits against other brands. Now, this does not mean that Coca-Cola is bad, but they're trying to say that compared to Coca-Cola, they are the better brand, and that is all they are trying to communicate, right? So that is for uniqueness of brand associations. So We just saw the video case on zero sugar done right, and it has helped us to establish how the uniqueness of brand associations can be implicitly communicated by brands to make sure that they stand out from their competitors. So how do we as marketers identify and establish brand positioning? We can do this using 4 main steps. The first one is by using the brand positioning concept. The second one is by having a target market. The third one is by understanding the nature of competition. And the final one is by creating points of parity and points of difference. So let's break these down and understand them, starting from brand positioning. Now, brand positioning is the act of designing the company's offer and image so that it occupies a distinct and valued place in the target customer's minds. And by now, we've talked about the fact that without this unique positioning and association in the mind of the consumer, there is no way that when it comes to a consumption situation, the customer will be able to identify our brand and even choose it over a competing brand. So by doing this brand positioning through creating the brand knowledge we've talked about in the form of brand awareness and brand image, consumers will think about our brand in the right and desired way, such that it occupies a unique position in their minds and it maximizes the potential benefits that we as a firm stand to gain, given that in every purchase and consumption situation, they will choose our brand over other competing brands. So that is why brand positioning is so important. Now, aside that, like Nuruddin mentioned, the STP process is very important because we have identified from the beginning that when it comes to the differential effect and brand knowledge, brands mean different things to different people. So we need to be able to segment the market such that we can identify distinct groups of consumers who share similar needs and characteristics. And that will mean that they are likely to have a similar response to our brand communication and form similar brand associations to our brand communication in their minds. And that way we can make sure that our brand marketing programs are targeted at specific consumer groups to be able to elicit the kind of responses that we are looking for. So this segmentation can be done on various bases, including geographic, demographic, psychographic, and behavioral segmentation basis, or a combination of these, to be able to ensure that the firm is able to create a unique enough market segment that they can target with a unique offering, which will help them to build that unique brand equity that they are looking for to carry the firm into the future, right? So like we mentioned, behavioral segmentation can look at anywhere from the user status to the usage rate, to the usage occasion, to brand loyalty, to benefit sought. All of these will determine how a brand is positioned in the minds of a particular consumer base. Likewise, when it comes to demographics, in terms of income, age, gender, race, and family status, a brand will mean different things to different individuals who find themselves in these demographic groups. And currently in the GCB example, we were referring to the different generational age groups are determining how banks are choosing to market their brands to appeal to these different age groups. And unfortunately, based on our discussion, it seems GCB is stuck with the older generational groups and are ignoring the younger generational groups and what they look for in that service, right? We can also talk about psychographic segmentation, looking at values, opinions, and attitudes, as well as activities and lifestyle. And then ultimately, the most common segmentation basis, which is geographic segmentation, that looks at segmentation based on regions and geographic confines, including towns and cities and whole countries, right? Still on the matter of targeting and segmentation and positioning, it is not enough to be able to segment the market. You need to be able to target those specific segments that you can serve profitably, because you may be able to identify consumer groups that have similar knowledge structures and will form similar associations about your brand. But you need to be able to determine whether these segments are profitable enough for you to target them with your specific marketing programs. And as we have learned, resources are not unlimited. So firms need to be able to strategically choose among these market segments to ensure that whichever market segments they are targeting with the marketing program is one that is going to give them the highest amount of profitability given their current resource allocations, right? So that is for target marketing, which is a direct element of the STP process, being the segmentation, targeting, and positioning process. Also, marketers need to appreciate the nature of competition, because deciding to target a particular customer segment does not mean that you are the only firm that is looking at that segment as a profitable segment. There are other competitors who would have also identified this segment as being one that has potential. And therefore, as a firm, to be able to ensure that you are going to survive if you are to compete for this particular market segment, you have to be able to perform what we refer to as a competitive analysis, because it helps you to weigh your resources and your capabilities among other factors that are relevant to serving this market segment in relation to your ability to do so as compared with your competition. And this helps you to be able to choose those segments that you know you can effectively compete in, given your resources and capabilities, and end up making profit for your efforts. Likewise, when it comes to points of parity and points of difference, being a direct offshoot from what we have discussed so far regarding the STP process, brand positioning, as well as the nature of competition, you have to be able to create points of parity, because points of parity are what will get your foot in the door, right? So when we talk about points of parity, we are basically talking about those aspects of your brand or products that are similar to those of the products and brands of your competitors. Because without having certain points of parity, you will not be able to fit into a particular segment or product category. True or false?
True.
Good.
True.
So you need those points of parity to make sure that you are part of the group in a given category, or you fit into that category, or it makes sense for you to be in the company you are in that product category. However, to be able to make sure that you set yourself apart and become the preferred brand in that category, you need to establish points of difference, which are attributes or benefits that consumers will strongly associate with your brand. So they'll associate these with your brand and not with those of your competitors, which will lead them to positively evaluate your brand and believe that your brand will give them what other brands in the same product category cannot offer them. And that is how you will end up becoming the preferred brand and occupy that unique position in the mind of the consumer through the strong associations that will be created as a result of the point of difference that the firm is marketing, right? So we need not just points of parity associations, which are shared between the brand and other competitors in the same category. But most importantly, we need points of different associations as well. That will put us in the same category with our competition, but set us apart from our competition in the same breath, such that we offer what they offer, but we go a step further to give you something that they will not give you. So as Nuruddin is saying in the chat, exactly, points of parity refer to the sameness, which is what you will offer that your competition will also offer. But the points of difference are the unique benefits that you will offer in addition to what your competitors will offer, which they cannot give to your customer, right? So points of parity are important because without them, they can undermine the points of difference that you have. So to make sure that your points of difference stand out and are important and can help you to achieve that differential effect among your customers, you need to have points of parity to help set you clearly apart from your competitors, right? So that being said, for the brand to achieve a point of parity on an attribute or benefit, we need to make sure that our marketing programs are designed such that they effectively convince our consumers that we are good enough in that dimension, or we share the same characteristics in that dimension as our competitors. However, the points of difference must give them a compelling reason to choose us over our competition, given that we provide what our competitors provide, but we go a step further to provide even more than they do, thereby making us the preferred choice. out of all the competing brands in our specific category. And with that, we've come to the end of our session for today.